Most people picture the Old West as gunfights and grit, but the men who actually worked the frontier knew survival had nothing to do with heroics. The land itself was the real enemy. Out on the Great Plains, water could poison you, cold could kill you overnight, and the wind, dust, and distance broke more cowboys than any outlaw ever did. Trail diaries make it clear the frontier punished even small mistakes. A broken strap, a bad drink, or one careless night on the ground could end you long before trouble ever drew a gun. So cowboys relied on something Hollywood never shows: quiet, practical survival tricks passed from one rider to the next. These weren't glamorous. They were simple ideas, smart improvisations, and hard-earned habits that kept men alive when nothing else would. Today, we're counting down the 13 hidden frontier survival tricks cowboys truly swore by. The real methods that helped working men last one more day on a land that didn't care whether they did. Let's start with a trick most people have never even heard of. Number 13, the dust veil, the disguise that hid a cowboy in plain sight. On the open plains, a cowboy's worst enemy wasn't a rifle or a revolver. It was visibility. Out here, a single moving figure could be spotted from miles away, long before you ever saw who was watching you. The land offered no cover, no trees, no shadows. If you stood out, you were a target. So cowboys used a trick the frontier handed them for free. After a hard ride, a horse's sweat mixed with dust until it clung to everything: clothes, skin, tack, even the rifle stock. Instead of wiping it off, veterans worked it in. That dull layer of grit killed any shine, broke up their outline, and made them blend into the same earth-tone palette as the prairie around them. This wasn't theory. Scouts and riders crossing Comanche and Apache country wrote about masking themselves with dust long before printed camouflage existed. Out on cattle drives, even trail bosses noted how a rider looked almost washed into the landscape after hours on the move. It didn't look heroic and it didn't feel clean. But for cowboys traveling exposed country, this crude dust veil could mean the difference between being seen or surviving the day unseen. Number 12, the snowline water rule, the winter mistake that could stop a cowboy cold. Winter on the frontier didn't need a blizzard to kill you. All it took was getting water wrong. Cowboys riding the high plains learned this the hard way, because eating snow, something that looks harmless, could drain your body heat faster than the weather itself. Out here, that meant fatigue, confusion, and hypothermia long before a man realized what was happening. So they followed a rule every trail boss drilled into new hands: never eat snow straight from the ground. Instead, cowboys melted it slowly near a fire, mixed it with a little creek water, or warmed it in a tin cup under their coat. It wasn't about comfort, it was about keeping your core temperature from crashing. This wasn't frontier superstition. Military reports from Dakota Territory and ranch diaries from Montana all warn against eating snow during long rides. Riders who ignored the rule didn't stay ignorant for long. In winter country, water could save your life, but only if you respected it first. Number 11, boot top ammunition, the last cartridges a cowboy couldn't afford to lose. A cowboy's gun belt wasn't just decoration, it was his lifeline. But belt loops stretched, leather cracked, and cartridges could slip out during long rides or rough work. Losing even a single round on the trail could mean facing trouble with an empty cylinder. So seasoned hands kept a backup stash where almost no one looked, tucked deep inside the tops of their boots. Boot leather hugged the cartridges tight, kept them dry, and hid them from thieves or curious eyes. It wasn't comfortable, but it was secure. Period photographs show bullets pushed into boot tops across Texas, Wyoming, and New Mexico, and recovered frontier boots have been found with imprint marks from years of carrying spare rounds. Trail captains even warned green riders to keep a few cartridges hidden, where dust and rain can't steal them. On isolated drives where help was days away, those extra rounds could be the difference between firing back or hearing a hollow click when it mattered most. For a working cowboy, those boot-top cartridges weren't backup. They were insurance. If you're learning something new already, let me know in the comments which survival trick surprised you first. Number 10. The bandana multi-tool, the one cloth that kept a cowboy alive. A cowboy's bandana wasn't a fashion statement. It was the most versatile survival tool he carried. On the frontier, dust storms, foul water, injuries, and brutal sun could hit in the same day, and this one piece of cloth handled all of it. When the wind kicked up dirt thick enough to choke a man, cowboys pulled the bandana over their mouth to filter the dust. When water turned muddy or filled with insects, they used it as a strainer to make it drinkable. And when accidents happened, which they always did, that same cloth became a sling, a wound wrap, or a tourniquet. Trail diaries from Texas to Wyoming mention riders soaking bandanas for evaporative cooling, tying them to hats for shade, or waving them as signal flags to warn a distant rider. It was the closest thing a cowboy had to a first aid kit, a filter, and a communication device all in one. It didn't look like much, but it worked when it mattered. But on the frontier, a simple bandana solved problems men didn't have time to complain about. Number 9. The bedroll heat trap, the nighttime trick that meant waking up alive. Nightfall on the plains caught many new cowboys off guard. Even after a scorching day, temperatures on the plains could plunge without warning, dropping low enough to numb fingers, stiffen muscles, and steal a man's strength before dawn. Hypothermia didn't look dramatic. It crept in slowly, and most victims never realized the danger until they couldn't stand. So cowboys used a simple rule that every trail boss enforced: sleep inside your bedroll with your boots and coat still on. The heavy canvas trapped body heat, the coat added insulation, and the boots protected against frostbite and kept your feet ready for a fast mount if trouble appeared in the dark. Shed any of it and you'd wake up shivering, soaked with dew, and too weak to work, or not wake up at all. Cattle drive journals from Kansas and Colorado describe riders climbing into rolled canvas like crawling into a cocoon, using their own trapped heat to survive the sudden cold snaps that claimed careless men. Out here, comfort was a luxury. Warmth was survival. Number 8. Soapweed and yucca soap, the desert plant that kept cowboys clean and alive. On the frontier, soap wasn't a luxury. It was nearly impossible to find. Cowboys could ride for weeks without seeing a town, and without soap, infections spread fast. Dirt in a cut, grime in the hair, or grease on the hands could all turn into problems that slowed a man down. And on the trail, slowing down was dangerous. So cowboys turned to something the West offered for free: the soapweed, also known as yucca. By crushing the root, riders created a natural foam strong enough to wash hair, clean clothes, and scrub wounds. It wasn't pleasant, the smell was harsh, and the lather felt gritty, but it cut through dirt better than anything else on the open range. Cowboys learned the trick from indigenous tribes who had used yucca for generations, valuing it both as a cleanser and as a mild antiseptic. Cattle drive accounts across New Mexico and Arizona mention riders stopping at patches of soapweed specifically to refill their supply. A little root went a long way, and hygiene wasn't vanity. It was survival. Out here, staying clean didn't make life easier. It kept life going. Number 7. The horsehair riata, the rope that held a cowboy's world together. Leather ropes stretched, snapped, and rotted in the heat of the frontier. Hemp frayed and soaked up water until it became dead weight. But cowboys, especially those influenced by the old vaquero traditions, carried something tougher: a riata braided from horsehair. It wasn't just for roping cattle. On the trail, a horsehair rope was the most reliable emergency tool a cowboy had. Horsehair was naturally stiff, resistant to moisture, and far stronger than its appearance suggested. Cowboys used it to drag heavy loads, lash broken gear, secure bedrolls, tie down saddles, and even help climb steep cuts or riverbanks. When a leather strap snapped, and they always did, a riata stepped in as a temporary fix that often lasted longer than the original part. Accounts from ranches in California, Nevada, and Texas describe horsehair riatas as prized gear, often passed from hand to hand because of how dependable they were in foul weather. They weren't comfortable to handle, but in emergencies, comfort didn't matter. A good riata didn't just rope cattle. It kept a cowboy moving when everything else failed. Quick question for you. Which would you have struggled with most on the frontier? The cold, the water, or the long miles? Let me know in the comments. Number 6. The saddle shield, the nighttime barrier between a cowboy and what crawled in the dark. Sleeping on the open ground was one of the most dangerous parts of a cowboy's day. The plains weren't empty at night. They were alive with scorpions, centipedes, and rattlesnakes, searching for the warmth of a bedroll. One bite or sting far from a doctor could cripple a man or kill him outright. So cowboys used the one piece of gear sturdy enough to guard them until sunrise, their saddle. Before turning in, riders flipped their saddle upside down beside their bedroll or over their hands and feet, creating a raised barrier that crawling insects couldn't easily cross. The horn, cantle, and high leather skirts acted as a physical shield, keeping venomous creatures away from the most vulnerable parts of the body. Trail journals from Texas and New Mexico mention cowboys waking to hear scorpions tapping against the saddle rather than their skin. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't superstition. It was practical frontier wisdom learned by the men who slept where everything else did. On the nighttime prairie, your saddle didn't just carry you. Sometimes it protected you. Number 5. Coffee grounds for foul water, the bitter brew that hid the taste of survival. Clean water was never guaranteed on the frontier. Springs turned stagnant, riverbeds filled with animal waste, and shallow pools could smell so rotten they made a rider gag. But cowboys didn't get to be picky. They drank what they found. The trick was getting it down without vomiting, and for that, they used the one supply no cowboy ever traveled without: coffee. When water tasted foul but wasn't visibly contaminated, cowboys dumped in coffee grounds and boiled it hard. The bitterness overpowered the smell, masked the taste, and made the water drinkable enough to keep a man moving. On long trail drives, the chuck wagon always carried coffee for this exact reason, not for comfort, but because it kept men alive. Ranch journals from Texas, Nebraska, and Wyoming mention riders brewing cowboy coffee from water so bad it would have been undrinkable on its own. This wasn't a luxury, it was a coping mechanism, and every cowboy learned the same truth. If the water didn't kill you, the coffee would get you through it. Number 4. Buffalo chip fires, the smokeless fuel that fed the frontier. Cowboys quickly discovered the Great Plains didn't care about their needs. Out here, firewood simply didn't exist. Trees were rare, brush was scarce, and nights got brutally cold. But a cowboy still had to cook, boil water, warm himself, and signal without giving away his position. The solution came from the animals that shaped the plains: dried buffalo dung, known as buffalo chips. When dried by the sun, these chips burned hot, steady, and with almost no smoke. That made them perfect for both surviving and staying hidden. On cattle drives, cooks filled entire fire pits with buffalo chips to boil coffee, fry meat, or bake bread in Dutch ovens. Soldiers on the frontier wrote about relying on them during campaigns because they lit even in harsh wind and didn't send up a signal column an enemy scout could spot from miles away. This wasn't desperation, it was efficiency. Buffalo chips were the most reliable fuel a cowboy had, cheap, abundant, and perfectly adapted to the land itself. On the open plains, survival didn't smell good. It just had to burn. Number 3. Frontier trail signs, the silent language only cowboys could read. The frontier didn't come with maps or markers. If a cowboy rode into unfamiliar country, he relied on the land and on the riders who passed through before him. Cowboys developed a quiet system of signs that blended into the environment, invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. To an outsider, the plains looked untouched. To a seasoned rider, they were covered in messages. A single displaced rock could warn of fresh tracks. A slashed tree trunk pointed toward water. A twisted branch meant danger ahead. Some cowboys even left subtle boot heel marks at crossings, telling the next rider which direction the herd had taken or whether raiders were spotted nearby. These clues were small, almost insignificant, but together they formed a language of survival used across Texas, Wyoming, Montana, and New Mexico. Trail diaries describe riders finding these signs miles from anyone, trusting them the same way soldiers trust coded signals. They required no ink, no paper, and carried no risk if the wrong person saw them, because the wrong person never recognized them in the first place. On the open frontier, the smartest cowboys didn't speak loudly. They spoke with the land. Number 2, rawhide repairs. The trailside fix that turned weakness into strength. On the frontier, something was always breaking. A saddle strap snapped, a rifle stock cracked, a stirrup tore loose, and miles from any town, a broken piece of gear wasn't an inconvenience. It was a threat. Cowboys couldn't afford to wait for help, so they relied on one of the simplest and most powerful repair methods the West ever produced: wet rawhide. When soaked, rawhide was soft and flexible. Cowboys wrapped it tightly around damaged rifle stocks, tool handles, reins, or saddle parts, pulling it into place with every ounce of strength they had. As it dried in the sun, the rawhide shrank and hardened until it became rigid as iron. A cracked rifle stock could be held together for months. A broken saddle part could survive an entire drive. Ranch journals from Kansas, Colorado, and Montana mention rawhide repairs as standard emergency practice. Not a trick, but a skill every working cowboy had to master. It wasn't pretty, and it added bulk and stiffness, but it kept essential gear alive long enough to finish the job. On the frontier, rawhide wasn't just material. It was the West's duct tape and a cowboy's second chance. Number 1, tallow protection, the grease that kept a cowboy and his gear alive. Dust, rain, sweat, and hard miles didn't just wear down cowboys. They destroyed the tools they depended on. Leather cracked, boots soaked through, rifles rusted, and saddle parts dried until they split wide open. Out on the frontier, losing gear meant losing mobility, losing warmth, or losing the ability to defend yourself. So cowboys relied on something simple, cheap, and vital: animal tallow, rendered from cattle or buffalo fat. Tallow waterproofed leather, softened boots, sealed saddle parts, and protected metal from dust and rust. Cowboys rubbed it into their gun stocks, wiped it across metal barrels, smeared it into cracked reins, and coated their boots until they gleamed with a protective shine. A bucket of tallow in the chuck wagon was as important as coffee. Without it, a cowboy's equipment simply couldn't survive the trail. Trail journals from Texas, Colorado, and the Dakotas all describe tallow as essential upkeep, done daily or even twice a day during harsh weather. Ranch hands treated it like a quiet ritual. Maintain your gear, and your gear will keep you alive. On the frontier, grit kept a cowboy going, but tallow kept everything else together. If you want more real Old West history, the side that never made it into the movies, make sure you're here for the next one. The Old West is remembered for gunfights and legends, but the real men who lived it survived because they understood the land. These weren't tricks meant to impress anyone. They were quiet, practical habits, learned through hardship, passed down through experience, and trusted because they worked when nothing else did. Cowboys didn't talk much about survival because out here, everyone was learning the same lessons. Keep your gear alive, protect your body, read the signs, respect the cold, the heat, and the water. And never forget that the land judged every rider the same, no matter who he was. Most of the men who used these tricks never saw themselves as remarkable. They woke up, rode out, got the job done, and hoped the day wouldn't turn against them. But their survival, the miles they covered, the storms they pushed through, the dangers they outran, came down to small decisions made at the right time. The kind of decisions most people today never even think about. That's the real story of the West. Not the gunfights, not the myths, but the everyday grit that kept ordinary men alive in a place that offered them nothing for free. If you want to keep exploring the truth beneath the stories, the side of the West Hollywood never shows, make sure you're here for the next one, because out on this channel, we go deeper into the Old West than most people ever will. Thanks for riding along. I'll see you in the next one.